Hi folks, HR Funk here. With a handgun that some of you had been asking me to review for a while, what I have here is a SAR9 9mm semi-automatic handgun from SAR USA. And in this video, we're going to take a close-up look at the SAR9. I'll tell you about its features and characteristics. And eventually, we're going to head out to the range and do some shooting with it. But I don't know if that's going to be in this video based on the way it's snowing right now, because it's snowing hard enough outside where I live that I don't know if you'd be able to see me or the pistol or anything else while we're out there. So if the weather clears up some, we'll head out to the range today, and that'll be part of this video. If it doesn't, then there will be a part 2, and we'll head out to the range with the SAR9 and see how it does. In any case, let's get on with the shop review. As usual, we'll start the up-close look at the SAR9 with the way you bring it home from the store, which is in the box. And for anyone who wants to know, the specific pistol we are going to be looking at today is SKU number SAR9ST. SAR USA sells quite a few different variants of this basic pistol, so that's the one that's going to be the subject of this review. But if you go to their website, you'll find a bunch of different variations on this same theme. Also, SAR USA that you see here is the US distributor for these handguns, but they are actually made by, I'm going to try to get this pronunciation right, SAR9 in Turkey. So this is a Turkish manufactured firearm. And according to SAR USA and the propaganda that's on their website, this handgun went through a 150,000 round test phase as it was being developed. They say it may be the most tested handgun in the world. I don't know about that, but that was posted on their website, so I wanted to mention it. Opening the box, we can see that this handgun comes with a bicycle lock that is nicely marked SAR USA. Again, SAR is concerned that we're not going to get our bicycles stolen, so that's nice. You get a SAR USA sticker, an owner's manual. The handgun itself, it comes with 2 magazines. There are replacement back straps and replacement side panels for the grip, and I'll talk about that as we go. There is some cleaning gear over here on the side, and also there's a nice little tool here that you can use to punch out the pin if you're going to be changing those back straps and side panels. Here is our first up-close look at the SAR9 itself, and as you can see, it is of the polymer frame striker-fired 9mm semi-automatic handgun variety that have become so popular in recent years. Here I've turned the pistol around to give you a look at the port side, and while you're looking at it, I can tell you that according to SAR, or SAR9, the slide and barrel of this pistol are manufactured from forged stainless steel. And I don't know if this next feature is characteristic of all the stainless steel SAR pistols or just this one or just some of them, but the barrel of this pistol is polished to virtually a mirror finish. You can see the reflection of my thumb as I'm passing it back and forth over top there, and the entire barrel has that same finish. And dimensionally, the SAR9 is 7.5 inches in overall length. It has a 4.4 inch barrel. It has a width at its widest point of 1.4 inches, and the weight is 27.8 ounces. There's no listing for the height of this pistol, but what I'll tell you is it is a full-size, holster-grade, duty-type handgun, so it's not going to be appropriate for pocket carry. Moving on to our top-down look at the SAR9, we'll start with the sights, and you can see that this pistol uses a 3 white dot system. The rear sight is drift adjustable for windage. There's no elevation correction other than completely replacing the sights with higher or lower versions, and I don't know what the dimensions of the dovetail are here, so I don't know what replacement sights might fit it. This particular pistol is not optics ready, but there are some versions of the SAR9 that are made to be optics ready, so if you're interested in that, check the website. We can also see on the slide there are forward and aft slide serrations. They are deep and they are functional, and I have no problem whatsoever grasping the slide and cycling it by hand, as you see. The next thing I'll mention is one of 2 safety-related features that, to be frank, are so poorly executed that I think the only reason they're included in this handgun design was to satisfy import restrictions. The first I'll mention is the loaded chamber indicator, which is incorporated into the extractor, and we've seen this with other handguns. there is a projection on the side of the extractor right there, and the idea is when there's no round in the chamber, as there is here, the shooter could potentially run their finger over this and know that that was not protruding and there's no chambered round. I feel that projection. As I run my finger across there, I can feel it. So it really doesn't serve that purpose. And when I chamber around, by the way, this is one round of non-firing test ammunition or safety ammunition. Now, I just can't feel that much difference. And I know there's a chambered round, but I can't. And the other thing that I'll point out is almost invisible. I'm going to bring this up here. Hopefully you can see it. Maybe I can hold it down here with a light and increase this. You can kind of see it there. There is the tiniest sliver of red paint right here on the top of the extractor. And as I'm looking at it under the shop lights here, I can see it only because I know it's there, but to actually use that to know whether or not you had a chambered round, I just think that's worthless. I think the entire, whether you're talking about the projection on the side of the extractor or if you're talking about that little tiny bit of red paint, is worthless. And while I'm at it, I'll go ahead and talk about the other safety feature that is equally poorly executed. And when I first read about this on the website, I picked this pistol up and I looked at it because I thought, I don't see what they're talking about. When I read the description, it mentioned there was a cocked striker indicator. And I looked on the rear of the slide where I typically see that type of a feature, and there was nothing there. And I thought, well, maybe the design was updated after this pistol was manufactured, or maybe this was an updated pistol and it was an old listing on the website. I wasn't sure. No. It turns out the cocked striker indicator is this little bit of red paint. There's something about red triangles that somebody apparently at SAR likes. And if the striker is not cocked, then you don't see that little bit of red paint. And if it's cocked, then you do. Again, I think that's absolutely worthless. Truthfully, I don't know what purpose a cocked striker indicator serves. I have never, when I was handling or using a firearm that had that feature, stopped to try to figure out whether or not the striker was cocked. Obviously, if I chamber around and cycle the slide, the striker should be cocked unless there's a defect with the handgun. Similarly, if I've not been certain whether or not I have a chambered round, I will do a careful press check to find out whether or not I have a round in the chamber. But I think both of those features are pretty ridiculous. Moving on to the frame of the SAR9, you can see the 3-slot equipment rail here at the front of the dust cover. The front of the trigger guard is grooved if you happen to prefer a finger forward hold on your firearm. The trigger guard itself is fairly large for gloved hands. It's not the biggest one I ever saw, but it's relatively large. You can also see that it uses a Glock-style inertial safety in the trigger. The rear of the trigger guard is undercut to help the shooter get a higher grip, and that's a pretty good undercut. That doesn't feel too bad. If you look at the general contours of the grip, it really looks very vaultery to me, or maybe a little HK-ish, with the curvature of the rear of the back strap and the overall shape. Now, as I said, this handgun has 2 different back straps that can be used to change the dimensions of the grip, and also there are additional side panels. So the side panels and the back strap are 2 different pieces, sort of like Steyr pistols. And if I remember correctly, the Tizosh pistol that I had a while back also had that same feature with interchangeable side panels and back straps. When it comes to texturing, you can see on either side of the frame there is texture for a thumbs forward grip or an index point for your trigger finger, although that index point is awfully far rearward. It needs to be up a little bit more where the disassembly tab is there. In fact, I would just tend to use the disassembly tab as a index point rather than that textured portion of the slide. The texture on the grip itself is not bad. It's certainly not the most aggressive texturing I've ever felt in my life, but it's not bad. There are some shallow finger grooves in the front of the grip, and some people seem to really get upset about finger grooves. These feel okay to me. I've not really ever run across any I don't think that I was extremely disagreeable over. But if you don't like them, they're probably pretty easy to ignore because, as I said, they are very shallow. The bottom of the grip is flared somewhat to help lock in your little finger. There is a scalloped area at the bottom to help remove a stuck magazine. If you're trying to pull that thing out of there, that gives you a little bit more grasp on the magazine base plate to pull it out. And there is also a grip tang here that comes back just far enough to give you a good feel when you're grasping the pistol. This might be kind of difficult to see, but there is some beveling to the inside of the magazine well to help with rapid magazine insertion. The magazines themselves are steel, and they appear to be very high quality magazines. They look like they're well made. I don't see any other manufacturer's markings on this magazine, so I don't know if SAR manufactures these in-house or if they source them from another vendor. But in any case, like I said, they appear to be very high quality. They do have witness holes on the back, and as I said, they are 17-round magazines. I did go ahead and load this up with 17 rounds of ammunition, and 16 rounds went in pretty easily. That 17th round took a little bit of extra work to get it in there, but this is a brand new magazine, so that might relax a little bit in time. It was not as difficult to get the final round in this magazine as some others that I've worked with in the past. So it's doable. It just takes a little bit more work than it did with the first 16 rounds that I loaded. I went ahead and disassembled the SAR9 because there are a few things internally that I want to show you, and I didn't demonstrate the disassembly because I cannot remember whether or not YouTube allows demonstrations of disassembly this week or not. But in any case, here is a look at that polished barrel that I was talking about before, and the feed ramp also has a nice polish, so we shouldn't see any feeding issues when we get to the range, but we'll find out. Also, this pistol uses a dual recoil spring system, so it should be pretty soft shooting. Looking down into the frame, this should be familiar to anyone who's acquainted with a certain Austrian designed handgun that's become very popular in the last couple, 3 decades. And the machining inside the slide is very nice. It's very clean. The slide is very dry, so I will probably put just a little bit of lube on before I go out to the range. And there is a look, if I can get it in the light just right, at the extractor hook. It appears to be pretty beefy, so we shouldn't have any extraction issues either, but once again, we'll find out when we get to the range. Turning our attention to the controls on the SAR9, I'll start with the slide stop. And this is a non-ambidextrous slide stop, so it's only set up on the left-hand side of the pistol. And based on the grooves that I see on the top of the slide stop, it appears that it is also intended to be used as a slide release because those grooves should increase traction for your thumb. There is an ambidextrous safety that I think is kind of curious. The safety operates in the same manner as a 1911. When the safety is in the up position, it blocks the trigger and the pistol will not discharge. When the safety is in the down position, the trigger will function normally and the pistol will fire. But what I think is odd is there are no markings whatsoever on here to indicate when the pistol is in safe mode and when it's in fire mode. Typically we'll see a red circle that is underneath here someplace, and when it's in fire mode, that red circle will be visible. When it's in safe mode, the red circle will be covered up, or we'll see an S and an F or something. But there are no markings whatsoever on here, so when you purchase one of these pistols, if you don't know how the safety works, you either have to read the owner's manual, and that will tell you how it operates, or you have to make certain that it's unloaded and then just mess around with it a little bit and figure out which way is fire and which way is safe. The magazine catch that you see right here has texturing on it. It is elongated, and it's pretty easy to reach when you have the pistol in a firing grip. I have to rotate it just a little bit to get a little bit more pressure on there to make sure I get a positive release of the magazine. And I think, based on the slot that this release fits into and the way it looks, that it's reversible, but I'm not certain. It's maintained in place with a spring, kind of like other striker-fired polyframe pistols that we see, and I have every belief that that's reversible. I just don't know for certain. Last, we'll take a look at the trigger. And the trigger on the SAR9 is... I'm going to be charitable here and say it's about like the trigger on other polyframe striker-fired handguns. If you watch as I'm squeezing the trigger, we see some take up here. We meet some resistance at about the point where the trigger bar comes in contact with the sear, and then we're going to see a lot of movement before the trigger finally releases. So there is a lot of creep in this trigger. The reset, for those of you that are concerned about that, isn't bad, but once we hit the reset point, even when I hold it there, I'm still getting all that creep in the trigger back to the point where the pistol finally fires. Now, if you're shooting quickly, you're probably never going to feel any of that. So this is only going to be when you're squeezing the trigger slowly and trying to squeeze off a very accurate shot. And that's kind of horrible. I'm going to go ahead and get out my trigger pull gauge, and we'll see weight-wise exactly where that trigger is breaking. Here we go with the test of the trigger pull weight. And as usual, I'm going to help start the pull by just depressing that inertial safety, because that can sometimes cause problems with the readings. First pull, 7 pounds, 10.2 ounces. And by depressing that inertial safety, that's not really changing the final reading that I'm going to get on the scale, because obviously I'm pulling it far beyond the point that that inertial safety is depressed. And this pull went over 8 pounds, 6.1 ounces. £8, 6.9 ounces for an average of 3 pulls of 8 pounds, 2.4 ounces. So we're averaging over 8 pounds on this trigger. And the weird thing that I notice with that creep is there seems to be a second stop in the trigger. I take up the initial slack and I hit the point where I meet resistance, and when I squeeze beyond that, there's another stopping point, and then the trigger finally creeps its way back and breaks. So it could be, after this pistol is fired enough times and that trigger is cycled enough times, some of that might smooth out and the trigger pull might improve, but for right now, it is certainly nothing to write home about. So that's going to do it for the up-close look at the SAR9, and based on my most recent check of the weather, which was about 5 minutes ago, I think it's still snowing hard enough that I'm not going to be able to make it to the range today. I could make it there, but you just wouldn't be able to see anything when I got there. So there is going to be a part 2, and in part 2, we'll head off to the range with the SAR9 and see how it performs. But until then, if you have any questions or comments about this video, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, stop by my website, hrfunk.com, and check out all the news and information there so you can see the latest things that are going on with me and the channel. And also, be sure to go by the product page, because a lot of the products that I have reviewed have links to the manufacturers on that page, and beneath those links is some information that's going to save you some money if you make a purchase from some of those manufacturers. In any case, that's it for today. See you next time, and until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.